Hello, everybody. You are listening to FAU Our Radio. This is JK Productions. My name is Jacob, and a little different show for you guys today. Usually, I come to you guys on Tuesday. Those of you guys watching me over on YouTube, you're used to this being over here on Mondays, but some of you guys know tomorrow is my birthday, so I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently. Had to change my schedule around to get this show in for you guys, and of course, it was a very important show to do, as of course we all yesterday got to see the Super Bowl, the Rams and the Bengals, a very good game that did not disappoint. But first, I'm going to talk about FAU basketball. Then we'll get into the Super Bowl, and we're going to talk about what we're left with after the Super Bowl, what the landscape of the NFL looks like now that the Rams have won, what this means, what we should expect to see next year, and finally, I'll get into a little bit of basketball talk, as this is, unless we have breaking news, this is the last real show I'm going to cover football on until we have free agency, which does start in about a month. So we're going to take a little break from football. That's been the thing I've talked about most to you guys. So we're going to finally switch things up a little bit as we do transition into the basketball season, some hockey. I love soccer. I know some of you guys also love soccer as well. So that is something I will start to get into moving on from this show. But first and foremost, I will start off by talking about FAU men's basketball, which since I last was on my show here last Tuesday, we've had two games, one of which I was fortunate enough to go to. Did not know I was going to be able to go to it ahead of time, so I was not able to bring that to you guys live here on FAU Out Radio. Did not able to commentate that game like I love to do. However, still was able to tune in, still was able to watch our FAU Owls take on Old Dominion and get the victory over a team that we definitely should have been beating. Old Dominion, not up to the quality of the FAU basketball that we've seen so far this year. FAU handled Old Dominion 81-62, led by guard Michael Forrest with 16 points. However, it was really scoring in bunches by everywhere across his team, multiple players in double digits. Guard Elijah Martin, Weatherspoon, who's been hot over the last few games, also got double digits, as well as Janelle Davis, two players off the bench there getting big buckets for our FAU basketball team, which at the time took us to 15-8 on the season. However, our next game, going on the road, we've had so much success here at home. FAU, they've been 9-0 in our last 9 home games, and a lot of success recently in general by FAU. However, going on the road to take on a tough Western Kentucky team did end up being too much of a challenge for FAU, as we did fall 76-69. Very close game. They're very respectable game from FAU, where we saw Michael Forrest again lead the way, this time getting above the 20 points mark. And the starters did fairly good. We had 3 starters get into double digits there, with Greenlee, Elijah Martin also getting in double digits. However, the bench scoring wasn't quite there like we've seen from FAU in recent weeks, recent games. And with that loss, it does take FAU back out of the top spot of Conference USA East. Middle Tennessee did reclaim that top spot by just a half game at this moment in time. And we are poised for a really, really big game this coming Saturday against Middle Tennessee. I believe that is this coming Saturday, 4:00 here at home. So please, we need all the support we can get. We need all the fans to show up, all of our alum, all of our students to show up, which would be the biggest game of the season for FAU. Getting that number 1 seed in the Conference USA tournament would be huge to push us forward to try to get that tournament bid, which we haven't seen since 2002. So we have that to look forward to. And just the rest of the season, FAU has had one of their best seasons in recent history, a winning record up to this point. So huge start from FAU. Couple huge games here coming up, especially that Middle Tennessee game, which we hope to see a lot of support there, and we'd love to see our Owls get the victory. So moving on to the football, moving on to the Super Bowl, which was a game that did not disappoint by any means. We saw the Los Angeles Rams take on the Cincinnati Bengals with the victory, getting a victory of 23-20 over Cincinnati. Man, this was a game that we thought it would be. We didn't think it was going to be a blowout. It shouldn't have been a blowout. There's two of these best teams, two of the best offenses in football, the 2 best teams in the playoffs up to this point, and both teams really deserve to be there. Both teams had to fight. Both teams had very difficult matchups leading up to this. We know Cincinnati's road was not easy, starting off as a team that nobody believed in this year. Most people, which including me, myself, expected them to finish last in their division. Eventually, they do win their division against the Kansas City Chiefs with a week to spare in the regular season. And then once they get in, still not an easy task. We saw them take on the Raiders in the first round, who we know how hard it was for the Raiders to get into the playoffs themselves. So there was a lot of fight on the other side. They took care of business there. Then to go on the road into Tennessee, the best team in the league, who had been getting it done without Derrick Henry, and they finally get Derrick Henry back. The full 22 starters are finally healthy for that Tennessee team, and Cincinnati still takes care of defense, getting a lot of help from. They get it done on defense. Gets a lot of help from the defense. Excuse me. With the 3 interceptions on Ryan Tannehill, the offensive line didn't hold up that game. However, the next week against the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, down 21-3, the offensive line stepped up, the team stepped up. They were down 21-3, like I said, and ended up coming back to get the victory. Cincinnati, without a doubt, deserve to be where they were and deserve a lot of credit to what they've got through this season. On the other side, Los Angeles, another team, they deserved it. They came in, they took care of business their first game against Arizona in the regular season, had to fight back in the division just to get the number 4 seed, to get the home field advantage in that first playoff game against Arizona, against a team that would have had the home field advantage and had already beaten them once in the season so far. They absolutely demolished Arizona. Moving on into Tampa Bay, a game that, you guys know I was there. I had a great time watching that game, and they came out firing. They came out dominating, and then took their foot off the gas, made things a little difficult for themselves. But ultimately, the talents of Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford finally prevailed. They were able to get the victory there. And then against San Francisco, the battle of the NFC West. San Francisco had beaten them twice already in the season so far, and San Francisco arguably deserved to win that game. But all that matters is who wins. What's the final score? And the final score was the Rams just edging it out by 3 points over the San Francisco 49ers. So both teams came into this game firing. Both teams came into this game deserving to be here. And it was a game that really could have gone either way. Joe Burrow had a pretty good game, especially, second year, first time in the Super Bowl, 22 of 33, 263 yards, one touchdown, 0 interceptions on the day. Though the running game for Cincinnati was far better off than it was on the other side for Los Angeles. Joe Mixon had a pretty decent game with 72 yards on the ground, and of course had that passing touchdown to T. Higgins in the back of the end zone. Receiving wise, previously mentioned, T. Higgins did have the best game for Cincinnati on the day, finishing 100 yards, 2 catches. We can argue about that one play. We all know is likely a face mask. He grabbed the face mask. Jalen Ramsey's looking around like, hey, come on, guys, where's the call? Didn't get the call, was a touchdown, it stood, and he had a really good game numbers-wise. And on the other side, Matt Stafford, the guy they go out to bring in to steady the ship, to lead them to the promised land. Matt Stafford finishes 283, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like I said, the running game was not there. Cam Akers finished with just 21 yards. Darrell Henderson with 7. Sony Michel with 2. 43 yards total in rushing, which, if you said this a year ago, this is just the opposite of what we've seen from the Rams. We know this is what McVay always wanted to be. And when he had Jared Goff in there, he had to be a running game. He had to be a team that relied consistently on the running game to open up the pass because of their lack of talent there at quarterback. However, with the 43 rushing yards, that's not what we expect from this offense. Not what we expect from one of the best offensive lines in football. And Cincinnati did a really good job up front. And then we look over the receiving game, and of course, that's where we see the big difference. Cooper Kupp, the eventual Super Bowl MVP, having a game that we knew he would have. 8 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's incredible, the season that Cooper Kupp has had so far, well, ended up having this year. And I'd argue that was the best performance by a wide receiver in NFL history over the course of the season. Cooper Kupp finished 178 catches, 2,425 yards, and 22 touchdowns. Finished the season as the offensive player of the year, was a unanimous All-Pro, Triple Crown winner, and then finished it off with a Super Bowl victory and a Super Bowl MVP. We've never seen something like that before. We thought that's what we were going to get from Randy Moss when he did join the Patriots. However, they weren't able to get a Super Bowl there. We've seen something similar from Jerry Rice, where we've seen a Super Bowl MVP. We saw a Triple Crown winner. We saw an Offensive Player of the Year. But those were all in different seasons. Cooper Kupp did it in 1 year. Nearly getting 2,500 yards total on the season is absolutely unheard of by a wide receiver. And the Los Angeles Rams defense, the guys that you wanted to show up, showed up. Aaron Donald, what a game. What a man. Reports coming out that he may retire, and we'll get into that when I discuss what I think this means for the NFL going forward. However, Aaron Donald had 2 sacks on the day, 2 tackles for loss with that. Von Miller, you bring him in at the trade deadline. 2 sacks, 2 important sacks. Jalen Ramsey, I can't lie. Jalen Ramsey got burnt. Jalen Ramsey got burnt multiple times. Now, 100% that one pass was a face mask. That one touchdown long down the field to T. Higgins was a face mask, undoubtedly. However, we've seen now with the replay, the last play of Cincinnati's offense, which ended up being the last play of the year for them, Jamar Chase is wide open down the sideline. Jalen Ramsey is basically on the floor. He tripped. I'm not sure exactly what it was. However, Jalen Ramsey's all but on the floor. Jamar Chase has got 3 yards of separation. And if Joe Burrow had more time, I'd be having a different conversation here right now. All likelihood that Jamar Chase makes the catch, scores his touchdown, and with 40 seconds left, Rams with all 3 timeouts, albeit, however, down by 4, that would have been fun. I wish we could have seen it. I was rooting for the Bengals. I predicted the Bengals to win, as you guys all know. I went with the Tim the Tatman jinx. He was predicting the Rams. I went with the Bengals, and I was wrong. And I'm okay with being wrong. I saw something in the Bengals that we did see last night. They were one of the best offenses in the league, if not the single best offense in the league this year. The receiving core that they have there, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, is amazing. Joe Mixon's going to get it done in the running game. And of course, led by Joe Burrow at quarterback. They have everything you want on offense, except the offensive line, which the offensive line really let down last night. Joe Burrow was sacked 7 times. And that last play of the game, albeit not a sack, might as well have been a sack. Aaron Donald bull rushes up the middle, gets into Joe Burrow's face, has him in a wrap. Burrow kind of flings it out there. Very similar, eerily similar to how the NFC Championship game ended, where we saw Aaron Donald chasing down Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo just flicks it out, and what ended up being an interception, this time which falls incomplete on 4th down. Rams get the ball. Bengals only have 1 timeout. The game's over. The Rams defensive line could have had multiple other sacks on the day where Joe Burrow made a move, either just throwing it out of bounds, trying to make a play. But the offensive line, the Cincinnati Bengals, was awful, and we knew that was something that was an issue for Cincinnati. We saw them drastically improve against the Kansas City Chiefs, only allowing the 1 sack on the day. However, Joe Burrow is sacked 19 times over the course of the postseason, which is the most in NFL postseason history. And just on an individual game basis, the offensive linemen of the Cincinnati Bengals had a 14% win block percentage, which is the worst in a game all season long. And of course, in the most important game of the year is ultimately what cost them the game. But they weren't out of it. This is a game that truly could have gone either way. We saw in the first half, Odell Beckham get in the end zone first, which is something that I really wanted to see. You want to see your stars perform in the big moments. And Odell getting the first touchdown and reacting only like Odell would with his just flamboyant nature, that is really exciting and really amazing to see. Getting that first touchdown there. Bengals take it back down the field, get a field goal, themselves. And then Rams take it back down the field again. This time, Cooper Kupp finally gets his first touchdown. And there was a pretty big play that came after the touchdown with the botched extra point attempt, which, had things gone a little differently, really could have made a difference in the game. Had Jamar Chase scored the touchdown there, and of course, assuming Evan McPherson converts the field goal, the extra point afterwards, Cincinnati would have taken a 4-point lead, which would have required the Rams just to go down and score a touchdown instead of being able to kick a field goal to tie the game. So that would have been huge. But then at the time, the Rams do go up by 10. And the last score of the second half was a pass from a running back, Joe Mixon, getting it to T. Higgins in the back corner. Great play call, great play execution by the non-quarterback, throwing it to the wide receiver, T. Higgins. Then the very first play, I believe, coming out of the second half, T. Higgins gets that bomb of a pass from Joe Burrow, which it was face mask. It was a penalty. I didn't hear a whistle. I didn't see a flag, so it counted. There we see Cincinnati take their first lead of the day, 17-13, followed up by an Evan McPherson field goal after the Rams' first or second play from scrimmage of the second half, which we then see the Cincinnati Bengals go up by a full touchdown, 20-13. And that's really where I started to believe. The entire first half, the Rams played well. The Rams played better. The stars showed up. Odell had his touchdown, had a great second catch, which he took and got some yards after catch. But then we did see Odell go down, not to return, which is really unfortunate. You don't want the two best teams to show up to the Super Bowl and then injury comes in. Injury plays an impact as to who could potentially win this game. Odell goes down there at the end of the second half, and the offense did change for the Rams. It looked a lot more tight. It looked a lot more awkward. You have the superstar athletic wide receiver in Odell, where you give him the ball and he's going to make a play. And you still have Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, the best receiver in football this year, in my opinion, the best player in football this year. He would have got my MVP vote over Rodgers, over Brady. I would have given it to Cooper Kupp. So you still have Cooper Kupp in there, and he obviously made the difference on the day. However, you lose him, you lose Odell, him university. That's a big difference for your offense. And we did see how that affected them. The first pass of the second half goes off the hands of number 18. I forget how to pronounce his last name, which ends up being an interception. And with that interception, with the Bengals getting the ball there, already had taken the lead, had the opportunity to get another touchdown. Instead of being up by 10, could have been up by 14. Now you're looking at instead of being up by 7, ended up being up by 11. Still a 2-score game. And you're looking at that like, we've seen this story before with Cincinnati. They're down. They were down to the Tennessee Titans, ended up winning the game. They were down to the Chiefs, 21-3, ended up winning the game. They were down to the Rams 13-3, not an insurmountable lead by any means. And now they have the ball. They already scored a touchdown. They're very close to their end zone already. And the Rams are injured. The Rams are hurt. Jalen Ramsey's not having his best game. You start to think, is this actually going to happen? And I did. I was believing. I was believing the Bengals like I had believed in the Bengals all week leading up to that moment. They only get a field goal out of it. Gives them a full 7-point lead. The Rams, then a drive later, end up getting a field goal off of Matt Gay, bring him in within 4 points. And it was really anybody's ball game at that point. A lot of possessions that led to nothing. And then we saw a special. We saw why the Rams decided to move off Jared Goff to bring in Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford leads them down the field. There's a potential play where he made a no-look pass on I believe it's a 3rd and 8. He's looking at his tight end, short. The linebacker bites, and really without even moving his head, hits Cooper Kupp over the middle of the field. If Jared Goff makes that throw, God knows which player in black and orange catches the ball. Hopefully not Eli Apple. Jeez, anybody but Eli Apple. Every time the the two interceptions the Bengals had, both times I was like, please, not Eli Apple. Anybody but Eli Apple. Uzier and Bates did get the 2 interceptions for them, so I was like, thank you. But on that drive, the Rams are leading it downfield, get into the red zone, get into 1st and goal. Then there's a little bit of controversy. You know, the hold on Cincinnati was a hold. The first one where the linebacker Wilson grabbed onto Cooper Kupp. It was a hold. It was a penalty. Now, the only real argument is that there's been very similar penalties at this point in the game so far. Why is that a penalty versus all the other plays that were very similar were not called? Why was the T. Higgins call not called? And you're like, okay, fair enough. It's a fair enough argument, but it was a penalty. It was a penalty that gave them another chance at 1st and goal. However, I forgot one part of that play. Small fact that the entire offensive line of the Rams jumped off sides before that play. Small plays like that make a difference at the end of the game, and ultimately those plays will be forgotten. However, it happened. They should have been calls. There should have been a false start call on 2 or more of the Rams offensive linemen, but it wasn't called. And then the Rams take the lead with a touchdown pass to Cooper Kupp. Kick is good this time, up 23-20. Of course, it was on Eli Apple getting burnt like toast. We all saw the memes afterwards. We all saw NFL players trashing him. You know what's bad? When people around the league, people you've played with before, Michael Thomas, played with him both in college and with the New Orleans Saints. You know, it's when your fellow colleagues, your fellow former players, just other players around the league, when they're trashing you, you are not a well-liked man whatsoever. I don't know where Eli Apple's going to get an offer from next season, just because I don't know who will sign on to play with him. He's not that good of a player. He brings a lot of distraction with him, how he was talking. How are you going to trash talk the Kansas City Chiefs, who were very close to going to a 3rd Super Bowl, could have been 4th Super Bowl in a row, that you narrowly beat them, deserve to beat them. And I mean, you played all right. You dropped what could have been the game-winning pick 6 in overtime. You guys did, of course, eventually win. But you're not that good. It's always the smallest dogs that bark the loudest, man. Nobody wants to hear from Eli Apple. Giants fans hate him. Saints fans hate him. I'm sure he'll be talking about the Bengals somehow, assuming he leaves his team, because I don't picture them bringing him back. So, of course, he's probably going to have something to say this time next year about the Bengals. But he gets burnt on a beautiful route by Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp getting his 2nd touchdown of the day. 8 catches, 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. Fantastic showing by Cooper Kupp. And the Rams now have the lead, 23-20. Bengals get the ball. Definitely have enough time to get in field goal position. I believe it was a minute 30 or so. Yeah, a minute 20, 25 left with 2 timeouts. They use one on the Rams possession. That's not insurmountable. And you have a good kicker. I love Al's. FAU is my love. However, go Gators. I say that out there. Evan McPherson has had the best season in postseason history, or best performance in postseason history by a kicker. 14 for 14, perfect on his kicks, perfect on his extra points. Has hit 2 game-winning kicks the last 2 games. You get the ball to the 35-yard line, and you're letting him swing it. Try to take the game to overtime. You have 2 timeouts. You have that stud receiving core, and it was working. They got the ball to midfield. They were getting close. And then we saw the offensive line pretty much cost the Bengals the game, which was the story of their season. Now, very fortunate for the Bengals, They have, I believe, the third or fourth most amount of cap space in the league, which they most certainly will use on some offensive linemen. They have the 31st pick in the draft. Whoever the Dolphins don't take at offensive line, you guys can have them. But they should not be discouraged, which of course you're going to be. You lose the biggest game in the country, you're going to be discouraged. It is hard to come back from, and we've seen so many times teams not recover. We know the stories of guys saying, "Oh, I made the Super Bowl in my rookie year, my second year. I should expect this all the time." Pat McAfee made the Super Bowl his first season, and he tells a story how he's in the locker room and he has the veterans around him: Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Peyton Manning. They're all really down on themselves, understandably so. And he's like, "Guys, we're good. We'll do the same thing next year." Didn't happen next year, the year after, so on and so forth. That was Pat McAfee's only Super Bowl. Joe Burrow is a very talented quarterback. Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, very talented. And they should hold everybody they want to hold on to. They should be able to hold on to. They have the money. They have the cap space to sign whoever they need to resign. Trey Hendrickson. Huge round of applause for Trey Henderson in the season that he's had with the Cincinnati Bengals. One of the best free agent signings in general. Had a big sack in the game to start off the game early on in the first quarter. Huge season by him as a whole. Really proud of him. Really happy to see him. I was so happy when they were doing the introductions before the game started. I really like what NBC does, letting the players do their own introductions. OBJ, him University. We've seen some other memorable ones over the years, but I'm very glad that Trey Henderson's stayed with the Florida Atlantic University, which felt so good to see on primetime, on the Super Bowl. So a lot of respect for him. Want all the best for him moving on to next season, where I'm sure he will have a lot of success moving on. And Cincinnati as a whole will probably have a lot of success moving on. They won their division this year, a young roster with a bad offensive line, built mostly through free agency over the last 2 years. They brought in 6 of their starters on defense in from free agency, including Eli Apple, but Trey Hendrickson, Uzie, Von Bell, also from the Saints, Larry Ogunjobi, who was injured for the Super Bowl. All these guys came in through free agency. Joe Burrow was drafted, of course. Jamar Chase was drafted, of course. So they did a great job building this team up, which is from a team that historically we know has not had a lot of success. And I've questioned the ownership there of what their true intentions are. Not putting it together a team around Andy Dalton. I don't know if that's fair to say necessarily. They didn't do a good job at maintaining the team around Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton got them to the playoffs 4 years in a row, won their division consistently. And they had the talent. AJ Green played really well on that team. Tyler Boyd eventually came into things, was a good young receiver. Tyler Eifert had his best years of his career during that stretch. But they didn't maintain. And slowly, the team started to chip away. Guys started to leave through free agency, retirement. And eventually, next thing you know, they're back to mediocrity, back to the bottom of the barrel. This team, though, talent top to bottom, and they're exciting. The modern NFL is all about offense. We saw both head coaches below 40 years old, young offensive-minded guys. Zach Taylor came from Sean McVay's coaching staff. So very similar mindsets there, very similar ideas of how to build a team, how to run a team as a head coach. So they're going to come back next year, and I see similar success. Now, the rest of their division is going to look a little different. The Ravens had a top 3 most injured roster in the league this year. Injuries happen. I don't expect it to be to that extent. And the Ravens have more of a chip on their shoulder than they did. They kind of dominated the division the last couple of years, got to the playoffs and laid an egg. But now somebody's better. Little brother is better. Cincinnati's better. They whooped up on them twice this year. So Baltimore should come back better. We will see what Cleveland and Pittsburgh does. All indications so far lean that Cleveland is going to stick with Baker Mayfield. I'm not a fan of that. I'd call up Aaron Rodgers. I'd call up the Seahawks, talk about Russell Wilson. I'd look elsewhere. If the Colts end up cutting Carson Wentz, which is something that looks likely, I'd consider bringing him in as long as you can get him on a relatively cheap deal. Get some friction there, a little competition there, because clearly Baker is not good enough as things stand. Whatever is going on with Baker Mayfield in his head, his play isn't good enough. So they're gonna most likely try to do something to improve the quarterback and certainly improve the team as a whole, even though they had one of the best rosters in football this year. That's just extremely, extremely underperformed. So Cleveland will be better. And then Pittsburgh's going to be able to decide what they want to do. I don't see Mason Rudolph as the guy. Big Ben is, of course, retiring. So Pittsburgh's going to have their options. I think that option is going to be Jameis Winston. And eventually I'll do more of a free agent breakdown. However, I do believe Jameis Winston leaves the Saints. Saints do not have money to be re-signing players. Should be losing all-pro left tackle Teron Armstead, Lost Trey Hendrickson last offseason because of it. They didn't want to let him go. However, they had no money. Kamara is getting big money. Michael Thomas is getting big money. Cam Jordan's getting big money. I'm sure they're still paying guys from years before, and they just push their contracts down the line, and this is when it's starting to affect them. So I do expect Jameis to be the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback next year. So that division, it should be getting better, but Cincinnati undoubtedly should still have a good shot at success next season. Now the Rams. And before the game came out, or before the game happened, and actually just before I get into that, Ian Rappaport, Odell Beckham Jr. is believed to have torn his ACL, which it stinks. It stinks to see a star of his magnitude go down in the biggest game, like I mentioned. His personality, his talent level, really unfortunate to see. And he is going to be a free agent this offseason, so that really should affect what ends up happening with Odell. So really sucks to see there. But the Rams in general, fantastic job at building a roster. The truest definition of going all in. What's their mantra? F them picks. Haven't had a first round pick since Jared Goff. Not going to have another one at least till 2025. They've gone all in. They've gone all in for a couple of years now, and we're seeing it. Some of the guys they brought in, Matt Stafford, went out and traded for Sony Michel when Cam Akers went down. Bring in Odell Beckham Jr. Bring in Von Miller. Bring in Jalen Ramsey a few years ago. Bring in Andrew Whitworth. So many guys have been brought in via trade, via free agency, that they had no choice but to win it now. And they did. That was something that I said might be too much for them. That pressure of, if we're not winning it now, when are we going to win it? That was my biggest concern coming to the playoffs for the Rams. How much pressure is around them? The Super Bowl potentially being in their home stadium, which eventually did. Very impatient owner, Stan Kroenke. What happens if they lose? They just did us the favor not having to ask those questions in the first place. The Rams win their first Super Bowl in Los Angeles, first Super Bowl since the St. Louis Rams beat the Tennessee Titans in the early 2000s. And they did it by pushing all their chips into the table, saying, we're going for it now. We want to win now. We don't care about next year or 2 years or 3 years from now. We want to win now. And they've done that for a few years now. And the final piece was Matt Stafford. You had Jared Goff, who had gotten you to Super Bowl. Jared Goff was good enough. Jared Goff didn't win a Super Bowl. Jared Goff let down in the biggest games. Matt Stafford was the difference for this Rams offense. Running game wasn't going on. Running game had 43 yards, 7 of which was to Cooper Kupp on a wide receiver handoff. You're not winning that game with Jared Goff. I think that's pretty simply put. You're not winning that game with Jared Goff. Jared Goff gets sent off to Detroit. We all know the season he's had. He's definitely not the long-term answer there for Detroit. Probably going to stick with him for a season. This is not a good quarterback draft, unfortunately, for Detroit. So I see them likely sticking with Jared Goff through this season or through next season. But Los Angeles did it. They pushed their chips in. They said we're going all out. We're going for it. And it pulled off. But now there's some legitimate questions. What's next? You won a Super Bowl. Everything is going to simmer and be wonderful for the next month, maybe the next few weeks even. But there were some eyebrows to be raised before the game. NBC reported that Aaron Donald might be retiring now. They said that if he wins the game, reports are that he might be retiring. And he was asked that straight up in his post-game conference and basically said, we'll see. We'll see. Now, I have a hard time seeing somebody in the prime of their career retiring like he did, but it wouldn't be absurd. He's had 8 Pro Bowl seasons, 7 All-Pro seasons in an 8-year career. Been to 2 Super Bowls, won 1. Has had one of the best careers in 8 years of a defensive player we've ever seen. If you start to lose some of that desire to wake up early, stay at the gym late, you can start getting those thoughts in your own head. That's when it starts to deteriorate your game. The mind usually goes first before the game does. So question marks around him and question marks around head coach Sean McVay, who also was non-committal to whether he'll be around next season, which as a 38 or 36-year-old head coach, you're like, really? You have 30 years ahead of you. But Sean McVay, we know, is a very passionate person and is a very driven person. And if there's something else he'd rather be doing, I'm sure, for one, he'll succeed in it, but I'm sure he'll just, that want and that desire to do it be too much for him. We see him standing there on the sidelines, how just full of energy, full of passion he is. He can't contain himself sometimes, which we all saw the video a few years ago of the pullback coach of how he needs somebody to contain him and hold him back on the sidelines. He's just so full of passion. So if he's starting to lose the passion for coaching, he has the Super Bowl now. He's had a great career so far with the Rams. I'm sure ESPN will be more than happy to welcome into that Monday Night Football booth. NBC will likely be moving on from, Al Michaels will more than likely be moving on from NBC, which huge, amazing career by Al Michaels. My first time really hearing him, which wasn't even when I was born, was the Miracle on Ice game. Do you believe in miracles? He's had a great career as a broadcaster, which was his last game yesterday, but they're going to need a spot to fill there. Probably going to be Tirico or Drew Brees. Collinsworth probably doesn't have too many years left if he wants to stick around at all, knowing that he's going to be losing Michaels. So there's going to be avenues for McVay to do whatever he wants. If he wants to move into broadcasting, shoot. If he wants to move up into management, I'm sure he would succeed in that. So the Rams went all in. They've got what they wanted. But now what? Personally, I don't think either are going to move on. I don't think there was as much of desire. Like when the reports about Brady retiring started to come out, I believed it. I don't know why. I hadn't believed it in years past. I was like, no, that's just media speculation. But hearing certain words come out of a certain person's mouth, where he's talking about family, how it affects them, wanting to spend more time with him. He's always talked about wanting to spend more time with his family. But when he started talking specifically about how his family seeing him, how his family feels seeing him get beat up, that resonated, that sunk in, and I was like, you know what, this guy might be done. And of course, he ended up being done. I don't think Aaron Donald's going to be done. I don't think McVay is going to be done. So I think they're going to move on to next season. They're going to lose Von Miller. They're probably not going to re-sign Odell. He's going to take a long time to recover. Maybe sign him halfway through the year when he's finally recovered. Robert Woods, of course, who missed this game, missed the second half of the season, will be coming back from his torn ACL. So he'll be coming back. And, you still have Cooper Kupp. You still have Matt Stafford. Still have Jalen Ramsey. So the Rams should be the favorite going into next season. Deservedly so. Super Bowl champions. Great performance there by the Rams. Great performance by Cincinnati too, which was a great game. Really happy to see, and really excited now for next season. So going into a little bit of my thoughts of next season, the NFL has seen the rise and the dip of teams like really never before seen. Teams out of nowhere, like Cincinnati this year, have gotten hot. Teams like the Saints have collapsed. And the NFL landscape is going to look different next year. Aaron Rodgers is probably moving on from Green Bay. Tampa Bay is going to be without Tom Brady. He could come back. He could go to maybe San Francisco. However, he's not coming back to Tampa Bay. Tennessee, what does Tennessee do at quarterback? What do the Colts do at quarterback? So I'm going to give a little prediction as to what I think the top 7 teams for each conference will be next year. I just kind of want to do this for myself, just to look back at this when the season's over next year, just to see how correct I was. So in the AFC, I think it's going to be the Chiefs. No shocker there. Best team over the last 3 or 4 years. They have been the best team. Narrowly missed on the Super Bowl this year. You're going to retain everybody there. Eric Bieniemy is a free agent. So Eric Bieniemy could look to leave to go to somewhere which would show off his skill set even more. And I think that is probably the right move for him. So we'll see what he does. But the Chiefs, I still think, are going to be the best team in the league. Best team in the AFC, certainly. Followed very closely by them, I see the Buffalo Bills getting the 2nd seed in the AFC. Buffalo nearly beat Kansas City, and with different overtime rules, maybe they do beat Kansas City. But Josh Allen's not going to get any worse. They do lose Brian Dable. With Kansas City, it's a 50-50 whether Bieniemy returns, but we know Brian Dable will be gone from that Bills team, which will be hard to overcome. However, had one of the best defenses in the league this year. Have Josh Allen, have Stephon Diggs. I can't see him falling down too much. So I have the Bills coming at the 2nd seed, winning the AFC East. At the 3rd spot, I think the Colts are going to do something. I think the Colts are going to move off of Carson Wentz, and I believe that's the right move. I have somebody who's defended Carson Wentz for years now. However, I think it's time for him to really take a look at himself and think, what am I doing here? I would consider retirement if I was Carson Wentz. His game has really declined. He has a Super Bowl ring, even though he didn't really contribute to it. However, he keeps getting injured. His game has really regressed. He's not that old. However, I'd consider pulling an Andrew Luck and having an early retirement and going out like that. However, he's going to have his options, and the Colts are going to have their options. Russell Wilson is out there. If you add Russell Wilson to this roster, wow. The only reason if I'm talking about Russell Wilson going to the Colts, I have him at 3 only because I can't guarantee that. If Russell Wilson's on this Colts team, I might put them at 1. I might put them at 2. But I know they're going to do something. I know they're going to improve because this is a team that the second half of the season I was so high on and really disappointed by when they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars like they did. But I think they're going to do something. I think they're going to move off Carson Wentz and really look to improve at quarterback there. So I have them coming in, winning the AFC South, which leaves the AFC North. We've seen the Bengals win it this year. We've seen the Ravens win it in years past. Excuse me if this smells like a little biased, but I think the Ravens are going to improve next year and take the AFC North back. Cincinnati really hit fire this year. No disrespect to them. I'm not trying to down them at all. But I think the Ravens are going to come back much improved, much healthier, of course. You lost your three best running backs. Lamar Jackson was not healthy throughout the end of the season and missed the last 4 games from them. On defense, you saw Peters get hurt early on. I think they're going to come back better. I think they're going to end up taking the division. But with the 5 seed, I do have the Bengals right behind them. I think the Bengals are obviously an incredible team, and we're one of the best teams in the league this year. They have to improve on the offensive line. I expect them to. However, if they do not, this could be a bad sign for the Cincinnati Bengals in terms of building the team. That was something that I questioned for years now, whether they'll ever be able to be capable to compete in the NFL because their lack of track record of going out and building a team. Bringing in Trey Henderson is a great step in the right direction and showing that they're committed to building up a team, the Brown family. But now it's the offensive line that needs taken care of. And if they can do that, they'll definitely be in contention for the AFC and especially the AFC North. I do have them coming at number 5. Number 6, a team that did narrowly just miss on the playoffs, the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert has continued to get better. This team should have made the playoffs, had a few things gone differently. And I think they're going to continue to build that team. They're too good at quarterback to miss the playoffs. Too big to fail, dare I say. So I have them sneaking in at number 6 and at number 7. Did you guys really think I wasn't going to say the Miami Dolphins? I think Miami's going to improve on the team with their $70+ million in cap space. I think offensive head coach Mike McDaniel is just what this team needs. They have come out and hired an offensive coordinator. He was the tight ends and running backs coach previously of the Los Angeles Chargers, hiring Frank Smith as their offensive coordinator. He has a strong history in developing tight ends and offensive line. Miami's done a good job hiring so far. Bringing in Wes Welker, of course, as receivers coach, I think is a really cool move. And really building up this offensive coaching staff. And then I assume we'll use the money to build up the offense. And if they can do that, if they retain their defensive coaching staff, which I know we're retaining Boyer as defensive coordinator, I think this team should make the playoffs finally after missing it just so narrowly over the last few seasons, coming in at the last spot in the AFC wildcard. Then over on the NFC side of things, I think the Rams are going to stay top dog. I don't think McVay's leaving. I don't think Donald's leaving. I think they're going to keep most of their pieces for what pieces they can afford to keep and look to repeat. They should be the best team in the league coming in next year. They were definitely the best built roster this season, and it finally paid off for them, retaining most of their players. Probably not going to bring back Von Miller. However, the guys who they do bring back are certainly good enough. Getting back Robert Woods as well will be huge for that team. I see them getting that first seed, winning the NFC West, followed shortly by the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm not too sure how the divisions in the NFC side of things are going to look. I'm not sold on the Dallas Cowboys. You guys know I spoke pretty passionately about how I don't like the direction they're going, especially the direction the division around them is going. So Dallas is going to come into next season with arguably the worst coach in their division, a roster that you're not going to be able to add to that much. You're probably going to lose Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb is incredible talent. However, Dak Prescott's contract really restricts this team in free agency. So I have them at number 2, which nobody would be upset about that. If I asked any team in the league, hey, you will for sure be the number 2 seed in your conference next season, will you take that? 32 out of 32 would say yes. So Cowboys I have coming in at number 2, followed by a new division winner in the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings had a very let down season, especially with the talent we've seen them play with. The games we've seen them that they should have won, that they didn't. And it was time for change there. They bring in the offensive coordinator, Kevin O'Connell, from the Los Angeles Rams, which we've seen success just conversely with the Bengals bringing in the offensive coordinator, or was he the quarterback's coach? I don't remember, of the Los Angeles Rams, Zach Taylor. So it's a recipe that's succeeding. And this is a team with a great offense, young weapons, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook. Reports indicate that Kirk Cousins is going to be staying with the team. I think you kind of have to play out his contract this year, and then next year maybe look to move on. However, I think he's good enough to get you to the playoffs. I don't think he's good enough to do much else and lead the team further on, but I do have them winning the division, coming in at the number 3 seed. And then the 4 seed, the NFC South. I think the Buccaneers are going to lose Brady, probably going to lose Godwin, Ndamukong Suh, Leonard Fournette. However, I think there's still room that they could keep this team mostly together. And if you go out and go get a veteran quarterback, I'll show my hand. I think it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. And if Brady decides to come back, I could see a swap of the 2 quarterbacks, which I think both teams would be okay with, because Tampa Bay already knows they're not going to retain Brady. And I'm not sure if Trey Lance is quite ready. If he is, then they'll probably just stick with him and let him go out there. However, how do you say no to Tom Brady wanting to come and join your team? He's won a Super Bowl, both teams. He's been on 7 all time. But the Buccaneers, they're going to have to look to him to move off of him and to bring in somebody else in. I think that guy's going to be Garoppolo. However, you could bring Jameis Winston back if you wanted to. You could pursue other quarterbacks. There is an issue of their salary cap, having just under 20 million in cap space. That could cost them whether they want to go out and get a big quarterback like Russell Wilson. It'd be difficult, but we all know cap space is kind of imaginary, and you can make things work if you want to make work. So Buccaneers bring in a new quarterback. I have them still winning their division, which is really weak right now with Atlanta, Carolina, and the Saints not looking too hot. The first wild card spot, I don't think it's much dispute, should be the 49ers. Just made the NFC Championship game. Going to be moving on for a better quarterback. His first season with Trey Lance. Trey Lance looked good when he played this year. Didn't look spectacular, but he was a rookie that wasn't getting any first team reps. And when he came in, he did a serviceable job. He's very athletic with a great arm, something that works in the NFL. So at this given time, and somebody has to win that division. So somebody has to be second in that division. And it sucks that you're falling all the way down to the 5 seed, even though I believe they are the second best team in the NFC. It just so happens to be that the best team in the NFC is also in their division. So I have them at the 5 seed, followed by another NFC West team in the Arizona Cardinals. Now, we've seen the pettiness, I guess you could say, of Kyler Murray, and the question marks around that team are real. Whether Kyler will look to stay or wants to force his way out. I think ultimately he's going to stay, and they're going to run it back next year. Cliff Kingsbury has kept his job with a bad second half of his season. I think they should be able to get into the playoffs again with the talent they have there on offense with Kyler. But if they have a failure next season, we might see a different look to the Arizona Cardinals 2 years from now. But wrapping up the NFC, the last team to make the wild card, I think it's going to be the Washington Commanders, which I don't enjoy saying that out loud just because it sounds so pathetic. They could have done so much better. I always said my big one that I wanted them to do was the Washington Armada. They didn't, of course, choose that. Go with the Commanders, and it is what it is. But I do believe they'll sneak in to the last wild card spot. They will most certainly look to improve at quarterback. Taylor Heineke did all right. Helped in the playoffs last year. Had a decent season with him this year, but clearly he's not good enough to lead a team moving forward. They have been tied with Russell Wilson, and I think that would be outstanding for them if they can pull off that trade, and they could look to win that division with Russell Wilson. But we'll see what they do. But I do have them sneaking into the last wild card spot. We're going to talk about basketball just a little bit here to wrap up the show. Thank you, everybody who's been tuning in here to FAU Our Radio. This has been JK Productions. But we're going to talk about a little basketball, as we will look to talk about basketball for them primarily for the rest of the semester. We are going to have, of course, NFL free agency. We're going to have the NFL draft. However, outside of that, we're going to have basketball, hockey, soccer, of course, FAU sports on here. But one thing that I wanted to cover in last week's show, which completely just went over my head that I forgot to talk about, was the NBA trade deadline. And we saw some pretty big moves. We saw James Harden get traded to the Philadelphia 76ers along with Paul Millsap for Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. My first reaction to that was, I mean, I'm probably pretty similar to most people's, was, oh, wow. The 76ers are definitely better off. They won the trade. But then I was sitting and thinking, did they really win the trade? You're giving up on Ben Simmons, which we all knew was going to happen eventually and had to happen. And they were really fishing for too high of an asking price for him. Seth Curry was no small piece of that team. Andre Drummond's a little washed up. However, you're giving up 3 assets of your team plus 2 first rounders. You get James Harden, and I'm not sure how James Harden is going to work with Joel Embiid. He is like undoubtedly one of the best offensive players we've ever seen. We have seen him work with stars before. It hasn't necessarily worked out with him and Chris Paul. We've seen him try to lead a team on his own before, and of course also did not work out. So they're going to have a really nice roster on paper. Tobias Harris, James Harden, Joel Embiid in that starting roster, starting lineup, but they still have a long way to go to try to win the, I almost said AFC, try to win the East there with the Miami Heat, of course, on top. We then, of course, saw the Mavericks send Kristaps Porzingis in a 2nd-round pick to the Washington Wizards for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. I was really surprised by this. I think we all expected in the offseason for Porzingis to be traded, just the fact that he hadn't really done too much, but they stuck with him, and he had a all right season up to this point. Bringing in Dinwiddie, bringing in Bertans. Bertans is kind of like a baby version of Porzingis, not as tall, however, likes to stretch the floor. Dinwiddie bringing in some offensive guard play to complement Luka Doncic. And the Mavericks are not in the best of spots over on the west side of things, sitting at the 5 seed, which isn't too bad. However, you're 13.5 games back of number 1 seed. You're closer to being out of the playoffs than you are the 1st seed. So they do hopefully improve for their sake there by bringing in Bertans and Dinwiddie. Celtics acquired Derek White from the Spurs, sending over former Miami Heat guard Josh Richardson and Romeo Langford. And I don't believe there's any notable ones otherwise. Knicks. I'm just going through the rest of the list. Former Miami Heat guard Goran Dragic was traded from the Raptors over to the Spurs. And the Heat did get rid of young forward KZ Okpala for a 2026 second round pick. Never really got his footing on the team, so it makes sense that the team does let him go there. But just looking at the conference standings, we see the Heat number 1 in the East, baby. Full game lead over the Chicago Bulls 2 Saturdays from now when we play the Spurs. I will be there for the game. Really excited for that. But the Cleveland Cavaliers have had a great season at the number 3 seed still currently. The Knicks fall off from last year. Tyrell, if you're listening to this, man, the Knicks are kind of in no man's land. You're 2 games out of the play-in tournament in the number 12 seed. Not a good season so far by the Knicks. Over looking at the Western Conference, we have the Suns that have a great year. The Warriors have had a great year. Lakers really struggled, didn't move off of Russell Westbrook in the trade deadline, which a lot of us expected them to. Had the opportunity to bring in John Wall. However, they declined that trade, and they're going to be sticking with their guns, sticking with what they got going. Currently, they're sitting at 26-31 in the 9th seed, 5.5 games back of the 6th seed to try to get out of play-in contention in the first place. So they're not looking good in the 9th seed. LeBron looked a lot happier at the Super Bowl last night than he did with his team at this point in the season. So they got a long ways to go. And we have a long ways to go with the NBA season with the All-Star game coming up shortly, which we see, of course, Miami Heat guard Jimmy Butler will be over there. I forget which team he's on. I think he's on Team LeBron, but I'm not 100% sure. But we will talk more about basketball in the weeks to come. But this has been all for me. Thank you all very much for listening. FAU basketball this week. Let's just take a look at the games we have going on. If my phone would cooperate. FAU this Thursday will be having a game at home, which will be aired on ESPN Plus, taking on the top team in Conference USA, North Texas. North Texas coming in, sitting at 18-4, has had a very impressive season so far to this point. So 2 huge back-to-back games for our FAU men's basketball team. First with the North Texas game on Thursday, and then the big game against Middle Tennessee, who gets the top spot in Conference USA East on Saturday. Game Thursday here at the Borough, 7 o'clock starting time on ESPN Plus. And really unfortunate that the Middle Tennessee game isn't going to be live on air. However, that game, 4 o'clock, Saturday the 19th, 2 huge games, the biggest week of FAU men's basketball so far this season. Be very excited to see those games. As things stand, we do not have a commentating team for either of those 2 games. I know I will not be on the call for either of those 2 games. However, I will be looking out to try to get people on call for that game. So if you are a member of the FAU community who is looking to get into sports broadcasting, the basketball season is in full force right now, getting close to March, getting close to tournament time. If you have an interest in commentating basketball games, please get in contact with me. Or even if you like to get on a radio show like this, please, my Instagram is JK Productions. You also find me on Spotify and YouTube, both of which being JK Productions, which both have my bio is there with my email, which people can get in contact with me with. So if you have an interest in commentating some basketball games, we have baseball coming up soon as well. Please find a way to get in contact with me. Otherwise, thank you for listening to FAU Hour Radio. My name is Jacob. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye, everybody.